I love talking about the backup quarterbacks. We do it every single year on the podcast to remind you where some of these dudes are out and also to remind you of how inexperienced the backups are. As of this morning, there were 90 quarterbacks on the depth charts. I looked at our lads and I went off of that. 92 quarterbacks. 92 quarterbacks taking up roster spots. Now, granted, some of those guys are going to be cut. Teams are going to carry 4 guys. Teams aren't going to even carry 3 guys. I remember our good friend Danny Cannell, who we just had on last week. He was desperate for a paycheck to hang on. He wanted to be a third stringer more than anything, more than any guy I've ever met in my entire life. That guy wanted to be the third string quarterback. And he's admitted all of these things. So he'd be looking at teams, who are you going to pick up and whatever. And I think Mike Shanahan with the Broncos, when he cut him, explained to him, he's like, look, we've done all the numbers. The third quarterback never plays. So in the rare instance where the starter and then the backup gets hurt, and then everybody's like, I can't believe they only carry 2 quarterbacks. Well, there's a reason they carry only 2 quarterbacks, because they want to save the roster spot for an extra O-lineman, extra defensive back, because the third guy almost never plays in games. And yes, I watched the Niners playoff game last year, but that's the point. Like, we bitch about the rare, the rare exception, when in reality, that's why some of these teams aren't even going to carry 3 guys. So that number of 92 will obviously dip down, but usually not with the rookies. If the rookies are on right now, you used a draft pick on them or you went after him as an unsigned free agent, the teams are more likely to hang on to that guy. So let's run through some of the numbers and just emphasize the lack of experience at the most important position in all of sports. So if we're talking 92 total, that means 32 starters and 60 backup QBs as of this morning. 13 of those guys in total of the 92 are rookies, right? 13 rookies already in one class. If you add the rookies to all of the backups that I've gone through here and classified them as less than 10 starts, the less than 10 career starts is 30 guys. So I'm not going to count the rookies as less than 10 starts because it'd be stupid. They're rookies. But if you add the rookies to the other group, guys that have been in the league more than a year, gone through all the different transactions, practice squads, all this stuff. Like, you go through the history in our lads, you're like, man, that guy's been around. I don't even think he's ever thrown a pass. That's 43 quarterbacks, taking up almost half of the roster spots right now that have started less than 10 games or have never played because they're rookies. That's still crazy to me. I know I bring it up, but I don't know how you'd ever develop depth at this position when you never develop depth at the position. And in life, new is always more valuable than the same, right? I'm not even talking about new being more valuable than old. New is more valuable than the same. Think about what some of these young dudes go through at this position. They get drafted late. They make the team. Like, hey, we're going to give that rook a look. He never takes any snaps with the first team, never plays in a game. And 2 years later, he gets replaced by the kid from Western Kentucky that's like the same guy as him. So to defer to the teams that make the decision, because I don't like when guys sitting in my chair think everybody that's making roster decisions is a fucking idiot, because it's just not true. You know, whenever a team is bad with draft picks, like, man, those guys are all so stupid. You're like, all right, look, let's defer to them a little bit. They're the one with the quarterback who's in the room for maybe 2 years. He's in all the meetings. They see him around the team. There's a chance they also know, hey, it's not going to work out. Now, granted, he may never have gotten a chance to have it work out, but I'll allow it, right? I'll defer to the guys that are walking around with him, prepping with him for 2 straight years. But the problem, the whole point that I've always tried to make, is that they may not really even know either. I know I don't, but they might not. And they might just say, you know what? We used the pick on him. There wasn't anything that wowed us. No one got hurt enough where he ever got a real opportunity. I was just bringing another guy. Because even if we're not sure, we may think we know this guy will never be a guy. But the guy we haven't had in here, that hasn't been in the meetings, that hasn't run through any of the practice stuff, we don't know anything about him because we just don't know. We've never had him around. So he now is more valuable. Again, new is more valuable than the same. I added in the over 50 club. There are 7 quarterbacks that are backups as of right now that have over 50 starts. 7 seems low. Who are they? Tyrod Taylor, Mitch Trubisky, Case Keenum, Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, Sam Darnold. I feel like and Marcus Mariota. Dalton is the OG, 162 starts. Jameis has got 80. Darnold's got 55. Tyrod's got 53. Mariota's got 74. And Trubisky's got 55. And we know their stories. For the most part, Mitch a high pick, Mariota a high pick, Tyrod really nice college career. Dalton's a first rounder. Jameis is number 1 overall. Darnold was going to fix the Jets. They've had 2 guys in that were going to fix the Jets that did not fix the Jets. So maybe they're good enough. Keenum, I was looking at it. I was like, as I did each of these, I was trying to guess how many starts a guy would have. And Keenum at 64 felt low. And then you think about it, you're like, well, he had the Vikings year. And then Denver brought him in because they thought he was going to at least be average. Because if Denver had somebody who was just slightly below average, they would have been a much better football team because of how good that defense was for multiple years. But they just had disastrous play, and they tried to do a bunch of different things. Speaking of Trevor Siemian backing it up, 30 career starts behind Joe Burrow. Some of these teams, I don't know what Cleveland was doing at the position. I expect Deshaun, there's no way he's going to be this bad again. Deshaun's there. They move on from Josh Dobbs, who sends him to Arizona, who Arizona doesn't want any experience there at all. They've got Dobbs, who's never really played, Clayton Tune, who's a rookie, Driscoll and Blau, who's combined for 18 career starts because, again, they're all waiting on Murray. Maybe they're tanking. But Dorian Thomas-Robinson, the UCLA quarterback, who's a really good college quarterback, I'd be shocked if he's a long-term starter. I don't know if he'll ever get the opportunity, especially with the amount of money that they paid Watson. But now he's already penciled in as the backup. And behind him is Kellen Mond, who I never quite figured out either, who has 0 career starts as well. I mean, some of these teams are ridiculous. Tua, we don't even know if he's going to make it through the season. Career combined starts behind him. Mike White, who maybe we all kind of like, and then playoff hero, even though in a loss, Skylar Thompson. That's 9. New England's got Mac Jones, who, I don't know that they haven't done him any favors, but I just have a hard time believing Mac Jones is still the starter for the Pats in 5 years, maybe 2. But behind him, Bailey Zappi and then Malik Cunningham, who's wowing everybody in the preseason. That's 2 combined career starts. I mean, some of these teams just don't care about the lack of experience behind him everywhere. Granted, if you look at what Houston was doing with C.J. Stroud, naming him the week 1 starter, Davis Mills is behind him with 26 starts, who looked like maybe an emergency starter than Keenum, as we mentioned as well. But this entire sheet of all these backups is littered with guys that have never played, and they're hanging on to a roster spot, which leads to another point. It's why I'm never going to be sympathetic about the running back argument. All right? I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it from them. And I don't really want to hear it for hey, all my content's super pro player, and I think everybody should get paid, and just ignore the fact that there are negotiations that take place in the real world. The running back argument is flawed. It's borderline fraudulent at times because nobody gives a shit about the 13 quarterbacks who just lost their jobs that maybe never even got to throw a football in a game. I mean, at least the running backs get carries, even with the first team. There's a good chance if you're a running back, you get to play special teams and prove your worth. If you're a running back, there's a good chance you get a handful of carries in an actual game. Most of these quarterbacks you're talking about, they don't even get to throw a real pass, and then they're told they can't do the job anymore at 24 years old. Nobody cares about those guys. The running back argument was about one thing and one thing only. A handful of the guys at the very top weren't getting paid anymore because the position is not as valuable as it used to be. The receiver lifespan is the same as the running back. And the reason you never hear about that number anymore and people falling for it is because the receivers at the top end are still getting paid premier money. The running back argument, again, is about a handful of guys. These quarterbacks get tossed aside when none of us have any idea if they could ever actually start, and they get replaced by the next guys that are all going to be cut over and over and over again. The league, and maybe, I don't know if they're doing it wrong. It just feels wrong because we're entering a season where I could argue there's 11 or 12 teams that are going to be changing their quarterbacks at the position. We know how hard that position is to play. We know once you go from college to the pros, it's completely different. The pros have done a better job of trying to make that transition a little easier, but usually that's only for the top guy that they've invested big resources into. But I can't help, especially, look, I didn't play it. I don't know it as well as the guys that did. But I can't think that this is the way to build any kind of chance at a position when it looks like the teams are just like, hey, as long as he's new, that's better than the alternative. And then they never get developed. So enjoy it, folks, that have a starter that you can pencil in for 10 years, and you're never going to have to worry about who these guys are at number 2 and number 3.